Hey guys, tonight we're taking a nice relaxing stroll through Victorian London, a city of coal-black fog, street manure, and the constant creeping suspicion that your lungs might be turning into soup. You stand at the edge of the Thames, which smells like a blend of rotting fish, human waste, and the distant hope of progress. The air is thick with smoke from thousands of chimneys, and the fog, what they call a pea souper, is so dense you can barely see your hand in front of your face. Sounds peaceful, right? You breathe it all in. Regret it instantly. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're listening from somewhere cozy and clean, drop your location and local time in the comments, just so we all know where not to travel back in time to. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You arrive in London sometime around 1850, which is right in the heart of the Victorian era. Queen Victoria has been on the throne for over a decade, railways are connecting the empire, and Charles Dickens is busy making everything sound slightly more charming than it is. But make no mistake, you are not in a storybook. You're in a city choking on its own ambition. The street beneath your feet is muddy, mostly because there's no proper drainage and the rain has mixed with, you guessed it, horse droppings. They say around 1,000 tons of manure hit the streets every day. If that visual isn't soothing enough for bedtime, just imagine the squelching sound with every step. Nice, right? You wander down a narrow alley where laundry hangs overhead like limp ghosts. The smell of coal smoke, spoiled meat, and fish mingles in a way that feels almost personal. Someone's shouting in the distance. Someone else is singing a tune you don't recognize. Badly. It's late, but the city never truly sleeps, it just wheezes softly. This is the era of progress, but it's uneven. On one street you might see gas lamps flickering beside a shop selling silk gloves. On the next, a tumble-down house where 10 people sleep in a single room, and rats seem to pay rent. Historians still argue whether this squalor was simply tolerated, or if society at large genuinely didn't care. What's certain is that a good chunk of the population lives on the edge. And by edge, we mean one bad day from total ruin. Still, you've got dreams of survival, so you try to blend in. You pass a group of children selling matches and bootlaces. One of them glares at you like you just threatened his turf. He's maybe 8, and has probably seen more crime than a Netflix detective. You nod respectfully. Now let's talk food. You hear your stomach grumble, but don't get too excited. Vendors line the street with offerings like sheep's pluck, that's heart, liver, and lungs, and the ever-mysterious London particular stew. It's grayish, thick, and somehow manages to taste like soot and sadness. You buy a cup anyway. Regret it instantly. A fringe historian once claimed that one street vendor sold recycled cat meat, though no one's officially confirmed it. Not that you'd know the difference, honestly. You pop into a public house, where everyone's drinking something brown and vaguely alcoholic. Beer is safer than water here, since most water sources are. Well, if you're near the Thames, just don't. One sip and you might end up with cholera, or typhoid, or both. Victorian London loves a combo deal. The pub is warm, smoky, and crowded with men in waistcoats and women in shawls. Someone's passed out in the corner, and a dog, possibly a ghost, wanders through like he owns the place. It's hard to tell whether you're relaxing or slowly absorbing tuberculosis. Outside again, the fog's thickened. You can barely make out the silhouette of Big Ben, whose hourly clang sounds slightly judgmental. Somewhere nearby, a steam engine hisses like an irritated dragon. You wonder if this is what progress smells like: soot, sweat, and industrial anxiety. And here's the thing, the Victorians were weirdly proud of this. They saw the city's grime as a sign of grit. Better to be dirty and ambitious than clean and irrelevant, someone probably said while coughing up black phlegm. You keep walking. A lady in a dress the size of a tent struggles to cross the street. A man with a suspicious mustache tips his hat and asks if you'd like directions. You don't. He definitely looks like someone who charges extra to return your kidneys. Meanwhile, posters line the walls, advertisements for miracle tonics, hair restorers, and a traveling museum of oddities. One advert promises to cure melancholy with galvanic socks. That's Victorian for zap your feet until you're too confused to be sad. A scholarly debate persists over how effective these home remedies were. Some claim they were harmless placebo. Others think they might have done more damage than the original ailment. You figure it's all part of the experience. You pass a street preacher warning of hellfire. A group of workers trudge past you, faces hollowed by long hours and factory dust. One coughs violently, then keeps walking like it's just another Tuesday. It probably is. Finally, you reach the edge of a slum, rows of leaning buildings, sagging roofs, and doors that never quite close. You might be tempted to head inside for shelter, but remember, survival here isn't about comfort. It's about not stepping on anything that squirms. You find a corner and sit. The night grows colder, and the fog swallows most of the street. In the distance, someone plays a harmonica. It's off-key, mournful, and oddly soothing. You think about how people lived like this every day. How they found love, raised children, and dreamed of a better future, even while surrounded by soot and sewage. It's weirdly inspiring, in a deeply grim way. And as the gas lamps flicker overhead, and your eyes grow heavier, you realize you've made it through your first hour in Victorian London. Only 23 more to go. You wake up, if you can call it that, feeling like you spent the night inside a chimney. Your clothes, still damp from yesterday's fog, smell of coal smoke and stew. Your joints ache from sleeping upright against a brick wall. And somewhere in your left boot, something is definitely still alive. Now that you've decided to live in Victorian London, the next priority is securing a roof over your head that isn't also home to 12-legged squatters. Welcome to the charming world of 19th century lodging. It's not so much real estate as it is real unstable. You begin your hunt in the winding back streets of Whitechapel. Rent here is technically cheap, but so are morals. A local lodging house advertises clean beds, hot meals, no questions. You will later learn that clean means mostly dry, and no questions is a good policy when you hear suspicious thumping behind the wall. You step into the cramped entrance hall where a gaunt landlady eyes you like you're either a thief or a future corpse. She names her price, 4 pence a night, payable in advance. That's about the cost of a stale pie or a fortune teller's vague disappointment. You pay it. The room is on the 3rd floor, up a staircase that creaks ominously under your weight. Each step feels like a gamble. Will it support you, or plunge you directly into the neighbor's soup pot below? Historians still argue whether landlords of the era genuinely cared about safety, or if collapsing staircases were just part of London's rustic charm. You reach the top and unlock the door. Well, it doesn't really lock, but it has a latch that looks like it once met a locksmith. Inside, the room is roughly the size of a coffin. 2 walls, 1 cracked window, and a bed that gently slopes to one side like it's trying to slide you toward the floor. And the bed. Oh, the bed. It's stuffed with something fibrous and mysterious. Possibly hay, possibly newspaper, possibly dreams. You sit down and a cloud of dust, hopefully dust, rises around you like a Victorian welcome bouquet. The mattress creaks like it's in pain. You sympathize. You're not alone here. In fact, you rarely will be. That scuttling sound from under the bed? Rats. Probably just one at the moment, but they tend to travel in friend groups. You name it something comforting, perhaps Reginald, and hope he respects your space. Your neighbor in the next room coughs once, then again, louder. This continues for a solid 5 minutes. You begin to wonder if he's coughing in Morse code. Then it abruptly stops. That's worse. Much worse. This is a common lodging house, which is a fancy term for a human filing cabinet. These houses cram up to 20 strangers together, often with beds divided by thin partitions, or none at all. Privacy is something rich people have, and you, my soot-covered friend, are not rich. As night approaches, more tenants filter in. One is a woman with a baby that won't stop crying and doesn't appear to be hers. Another is a man with a twitchy eye and suspiciously clean boots. And then there's old Jim, who claims to have fought in 7 wars and lost to every single one. Lodging houses were sometimes policed, but loosely. Some had curfews or rules about noise. Others did not. One particularly quirky historical detail. In some lodgings, you could rent a rope to sleep on. Literally, pay a penny to hang your arms over a suspended rope and doze while standing up. Cheaper than a bed, and no risk of rats nibbling your toes. Probably. You sit by the window for fresh air, which is optimistic at best. A passing chimney sweep below yells something cheerful about someone's trousers being on fire. Another carriage clatters by, horse hooves echoing against cobblestones. And that weird fog. It's thicker tonight, so thick the gaslights outside look like distant stars trapped in soup. You nibble on a heel of bread you bought earlier. It tastes like sorrow and splinters. Still better than the inn's dinner, which was either stew or an elaborate prank. As you try to settle in, you realize the floor is sloped in exactly the wrong direction. Every time you roll over, gravity pulls you toward a mysterious stain in the corner. You wedge your boots under your side for support. This works, sort of. From across the hallway comes the sound of a harmonica. It's the same guy from last night, off-key, possibly blind, and definitely unlicensed. But weirdly comforting. It becomes a kind of lullaby. Historians continue to debate whether these overcrowded lodgings contributed more to urban development or urban decay. Some say they were essential to housing the working class during the industrial boom. Others argue they were basically infection factories with roofs. One fringe report from 1882 claims a man lived in the same room for 14 years and was never seen outside. Locals assumed he was a ghost. Turns out, He just really hated small talk. You try to sleep. The mattress crinkles under you like it's wrapped in parchment. Reginald the rat rustles in his corner. The woman next door starts whispering a lullaby in an unfamiliar language. Old Jim snores like a broken accordion. You count the ceiling cracks. Then the rat squeaks. You consider the rope sleeping option again. But eventually, against all odds, you do drift off, lulled by the symphony of creaks, sniffs, wind, and regrets. The city sighs outside your cracked window. A church bell chimes 3 times. You don't know if it's 3 a.m. or 3 p.m. anymore. It doesn't matter. You have a roof. You have a rat. You're part of the city now. You wake up to a thud, followed by the unmistakable sound of someone arguing with a chamber pot. Welcome to Victorian London, where your first chore of the day is not coffee, but scooping bodily fluids from under the bed. The air in your room is so stale you could bottle it and sell it as Victorian essence. Outside, it's cold. Inside, it's colder. And now it's time to get dressed. Here's where things get interesting. You see, Victorian clothing isn't exactly grab and go. It's more like layer and lament. Your undergarments alone could take 20 minutes to assemble. You start with a long, itchy woolen shirt that doubles as pajamas and plague incubator. Then come the trousers, baggy, stiff, and held up by suspenders that seen things. For women, it's far worse. Corsets, crinolines, bloomers, petticoats, and sometimes actual cages under the dress to hold its shape. Historians still argue whether Victorian fashion was a form of aesthetic expression or just an elaborate endurance test. You lean toward the latter as you watch a woman across the alley faint halfway through tightening her corset. Now, let's talk colors. That deep green dress in the shop window? Gorgeous. Deadly. It's dyed with arsenic. And no, that's not poetic exaggeration. It literally contains arsenic compounds. Prolonged exposure could cause sores, nausea, and eventually death. But hey, it looks nice under gaslight. You pull on your coat, heavy wool, slightly moldy, and your boots, which are dry on the outside but suspiciously moist on the inside. Your scarf is more whole than fabric, and your gloves only cover 3 fingers each. Victorian outerwear, putting the Y in stylish. As you step into the street, you blend right in with the crowd of half-frozen pedestrians. Fashion here is about function, mostly, though social class can be spotted at a glance. The top hat is the gold standard of upper-class masculinity. Yours is more of a cardboard suggestion of a hat, but you tip it anyway. A man passes you wearing a full beard that could house birds. Facial hair is all the rage, partly because it covers half your face from the cold, and partly because it suggests you're too busy being industrious to shave. According to one fringe Victorian etiquette book, a gentleman should grow at least 4 inches of moral strength on his chin. That's a beard, by the way. For women, modesty is the rule. Ankles are scandalous, and sleeves that rise above the wrist are basically an open invitation to ruin. Parasols are popular, not just a shield from the sun, when visible, but to signal class. Historians debate whether these flourishes were social armor or simply distractions from the smell. You pass a tailor's shop displaying a mannequin in a dashing frock coat. Price tag, 3 weeks' wages. The shopkeeper eyes you warily. probably guessing you're more likely to steal the mannequin's shoes than buy anything. He's not wrong. Suddenly, a shout. Mudlark! A group of children rush past toward the river, where they'll spend the day scavenging through sewage for lost coins or valuables. You spot one girl with no shoes, a dress made from what looks like a potato sack, and a grin like she owns the world. You kind of admire her. Your own clothing choices, while marginally cleaner, still mark you as not upper crust. And that matters here. Everything about what you wear tells people who you are: class, occupation, marital status, and possibly how recently you've dodged typhus. Remember that elegant lady you saw at the park? She's probably being poisoned by her own petticoat. That vibrant yellow dye, derived from lead chromate. Victorians loved colors that killed slowly: arsenic green, mercury red, and that delightful Paris green wallpaper that could actually emit toxic fumes. There's a story historians love about a woman whose gown glowed faintly in the dark thanks to its phosphorus-based embellishments. Was it true? Fringe accounts suggest yes, though whether she was admired or feared depends on who you ask. Either way, glowing in Victorian London usually meant something was about to go very wrong. You keep walking, coat wrapped tight, shoes squelching. It begins to drizzle, because of course it does. Umbrellas exist, but yours was stolen last week. Or maybe it disintegrated. Hard to tell. Most people just pull their collars up and pretend not to notice. You spot a chimney sweep, probably no older than 9, climbing into a flue with a brush twice his size. He gives you a grin made of soot and baby teeth. You wave. He disappears into the wall. Just another Tuesday. Further down, a gentleman struts by in polished leather shoes, cane in hand, monocle gleaming. He smells faintly of rosewater and entitlement. You try not to look directly at him. That monocle could buy your entire outfit and still have change for tea. Fun tidbit: some Victorians believed tight collars could cause insanity. Known as collar madness, this theory insisted that constricted blood flow to the brain could unhinge a man. No solid science behind it, but given how uncomfortable your shirt is right now, you're willing to believe. At the market, vendors shout over one another, hawking apples, meat pies, and used boots. A woman next to you examines a bonnet made of lace and hope. She puts it down quickly when she sees something move in the lining. You pause by a puddle to catch your reflection. Your hat's crooked, your scarf is unraveling, and you look like someone who's recently wrestled a badger and lost. But you're dressed. You're surviving. That's what matters here. Fashion, after all, isn't about looking good. Not in Victorian London. It's about keeping warm, covering up, and hopefully not dying from whatever your trousers are dyed with. As you trudge back toward the nearest bakery, or possibly rat emporium, it's unclear, you think about how much effort goes into just appearing put together in this city. You're carrying half your body weight in wet wool, your boots leak like government secrets, and you're probably slowly absorbing lead. Still, you're out there, in the smog, making it work. And if someone compliments your outfit, they might even mean it. Or they might just be checking to see if your hat's worth stealing. Either way, you look fantastic, darling. You've got a roof, sort of. Clothes. Barely. And now your stomach growls in protest like a Dickensian ghost. Time to eat, or try, at least. Food in Victorian London is a bit of a roulette wheel. Sometimes you win a warm pie, sometimes you lose several hours of your life to gastrointestinal regret. Either way, your odds aren't great. You sniff the air and follow the scent of fried mystery. Your first stop is the street vendor just outside the lodging house. He's selling eel pie from a cart that looks like it once doubled as a coffin. The pie itself? Lukewarm, lumpy, possibly moving. Still, it only costs a penny. You hand over the coin and he nods without making eye contact. You don't ask questions. You never ask questions. Victorian street food is fast, cheap, and rarely what it claims to be. That ham sandwich might actually be compressed offal. The coffee could just be scorched barley water. And the milk. Oh, the milk. It's often diluted with water from the Thames. Historians still argue whether Victorian milk was food, fraud, or slow poison. A woman passes by with a tray of jellied eels. You politely decline. She scowls. You feel a little guilty, then relieved. You find a bench and eat your eel pie slowly. The crust is thick and chewy, like old leather. The filling tastes vaguely fish-adjacent. There's a small bone. You remove it and pocket it for later. It might make a good needle. In the markets, food glistens under gaslight and soot. There are apples, mostly bruised. A few carrots. Some potatoes that look like they've had better centuries. Everything is covered in a gentle dusting of street, and none of it is refrigerated. That's not a concern though. It's cold enough outside to preserve your soul. Meat is tricky. You can buy sausages, but don't expect to know what's in them. One fringe newspaper article once claimed a popular sausage vendor was caught mixing sawdust with horse meat and spices. Another rumor involves cat meat pies. That might be a joke. It might not. You duck into a coffee stall, which is a barrel with a spigot and an ambitious sign. The man running it pours you something hot in a chipped tin mug. It smells like coffee. It tastes like despair. Still, it's warm, and the tin heats your hands. You ask about sugar. He shrugs and drops in a lump that may or may not be chalk. Sweet enough. Nearby, two boys are selling roasted chestnuts from a makeshift brazier. You buy a small bag and burn your fingers instantly. The chestnuts are dry and crumbly, but they do fill a corner of your stomach. You're officially not starving, which is as good as it gets on a Wednesday. The upper classes, of course, are eating quite differently. Roast beef, fish with creamy sauces, and enough puddings to rebuild the empire. You pass by a restaurant window and watch a couple dine in warm gaslit elegance. Their silverware gleams. Their napkins are probably cleaner than your entire existence. The cook inside wears a tall hat and a thin mustache that screams, "Gravy technician." You watch him plate something that looks like beef Wellington. You think about breaking the window. Just for a second. In working-class homes, meals are often bulk cooked on Sundays and stretched through the week. Stews are common, mostly potatoes and whatever meat could be acquired. Bread is a staple, though some loaves are bulked up with alum, a chemical additive that can make it look whiter. Unfortunately, alum also makes it harder to digest. Progress. You find yourself drawn toward a bakery. It smells amazing, like warm flour and fleeting hope. You ask the baker for a crust. He eyes you carefully and hands you yesterday's loaf for half price. It's tough enough to use as a weapon, but it's yours. And then there's gin. Oh yes, cheap, potent, and often safer than water. A few sips, and you won't care what's in your eel pie. The phrase, "mother's ruin," wasn't just a catchy name, it was a way of life. In fact, some mothers fed gin to their infants to keep them quiet. Historians continue to debate whether this was due to desperation or sheer exhaustion. For the very desperate, there's skilly, a thin soup served in workhouses, made of water, oatmeal, and vague ambition. You're not in a workhouse yet, but you pass one and smell the familiar scent of overboiled sadness. Oddly enough, food adulteration laws are only just beginning to emerge. The government is starting to realize that citizens are dying from surprise ingredients. One newspaper joke even recommended you try to eat the label instead of the food. It had more fiber. As you sit by the Thames, finishing off your bread, you spot a scavenger pulling fish bones from the shallows. He smiles at you with 3 teeth. You nod solemnly. You're both part of the same culinary ecosystem now. Even tea, the national drink, isn't safe. Some sellers use used leaves, dried out and resold. Or they'll mix real tea with random leaves, ink them dark, and hope no one notices. But you drink it anyway. Because warm is warm. And bitter is better than hungry. You nibble the last chestnut and watch the gaslights flicker on one by one. A carriage rolls past, carrying passengers who probably had veal and wine for lunch. You, on the other hand, had bones, chalk sugar, and possibly eel. Still, you feel strangely full. Not with food exactly, but with experience, and, perhaps, a tiny sense of triumph. Because here in Victorian London, dinner isn't about luxury. It's about surviving another day. Dinner's over, sort of, and now comes the next great trial. Getting through the night in one piece. You're tired, but rest isn't exactly restful in Victorian London. The city doesn't sleep. It dozes restlessly, twitching with fog and footsteps, never fully letting go of its grime-soaked consciousness. You begin your walk back to your lodging, which is a generous term for what's basically a narrow room wedged between 2 equally damp neighbors. The street lamps flicker overhead, their gaslight casting long, distorted shadows. A rat scuttles by, pausing to glare at you like you're the intruder. You tip your hat in apology. He nods and disappears. You keep your hand on your coin pouch, or the general area where a coin might eventually appear. You've heard enough about the midnight flitters and pavement artists to know the night holds more than just darkness. Thieves are rampant. Some are subtle. Some aren't. And then there are the snoozers, people so exhausted they fall asleep standing up, often only to awaken lighter by a pocket watch or two. Your lodging house is a tall, lean structure with a crooked sign and an odor that could knock over a medium-sized goat. Inside, the common room hums with low conversation, coughing, and the occasional scream from someone dreaming of workhouses. You nod to the owner, who acknowledges you with a grunt that could mean, "Good evening," or "Don't bleed on the floor." You climb the stairs, every third step groans, and the banister wobbles like it's contemplating early retirement. At your floor, the hallway is lit by a single oil lamp that casts more shadows than light. You find your door, unlock it with a rusted key, and enter your own small universe. Your room is a miracle of minimalism. One bed, one chair, one candle, and a chamber pot that looks both apologetic and deeply ashamed. You light the candle and inspect the bed. Still lumpy. Still barely large enough for someone with shoulders. The sheets are present. Technically. Before lying down, you check for the usual suspects. Bed bugs. Likely. Fleas. Practically family. There's a tiny mouse hole in the corner and a chewed-up shoe under the chair. You whisper a quiet truce to any current rodent tenants. Cohabitation is cheaper than traps. You remove your boots with a sigh that travels up your spine. One sock comes off whole. The other does not. You fold your coat as a pillow. It's softer than the one provided, which seems to be stuffed with angry straw. Victorian sleep isn't the 8-hour luxury you know today. In fact, many people slept in 2 phases, with a first sleep and a second sleep, broken by a few hours of wakefulness. Historians still argue whether this pattern was biological or just a result of endless noise and terrible bedding. Either way, you lie down and wait for sleep to find you. It takes a while. Outside, a couple argues under your window about who stole whose laundry. Somewhere down the street, a drunk sings an off-key ballad about sailors and soup. You try to tune it out. A moth flaps near the candle. It dies theatrically. You briefly consider making it your roommate. Eventually, you start to drift off. Then come the dreams. Not dreams, exactly. More like fever memories stitched together by cold drafts and subconscious worry. You dream of factory whistles, crumbling chimneys, and a street vendor yelling, "Whelks! Hot whelks!" as you sprint away without trousers. You wake with a start. It's only been an hour. Now you understand why some people just stayed up through the night. At least that way you weren't caught off guard by rats or existential despair. But you try again. You wrap your coat tighter and think about warm things. Tea, blankets, fireplaces, all imaginary. Another hour passes. You might be asleep, or you might be hallucinating. You hear footsteps in the hallway. Slow, dragging. You hold your breath. The footsteps stop outside your door. Silence. Then, a fart. Loud and lonely. The footsteps resume, brisker this time. You let out the breath and try not to laugh. Or cry. Hard to tell the difference. In the richer districts, people sleep in warm beds behind velvet curtains. They have attendants, heated stones, and nightcaps that look more like silk pastries than sleepwear. Meanwhile, your nightcap is a rag tied over your ears to keep the wind out. Night noises continue. A baby cries. A carriage clatters by. Someone down the hall sneezes like a gunshot. You think about heading back to the common room, but then remember the man with the twitchy eye who claimed to be haunted by his own shadow. Instead, you light the candle again and read the one page of newspaper you saved from earlier. It's mostly ads, tooth powder, corsets, and Dr. Manderby's miracle drops for spleen relief. One fringe ad claims you can grow back lost teeth with vinegar and prayer. You give it a try mentally. No results. Eventually, fatigue wins. You fall into a deeper sleep this time, dreamless and heavy. The kind of sleep that Victorian poets would call gravel deep. You wake up stiff, sore, maybe colder than you were before. The candle has burned out, the room is darker than pitch, and your breath fogs visibly in the air. Morning hasn't quite arrived, but neither has full sleep. You're in that gray in-between where you're not sure if you're alive or just gently decomposing. You roll over. The straw mattress squeaks. The mouse in the corner squeaks back. Just before the gray gives way to light, you hear something again, a faint, low whistle from the street. It's the workhouse bell, calling those who didn't manage to scrape together enough for rent. A reminder. But you made it through the night. Cold, half asleep, and possibly hosting several uninvited bed guests, but upright. More or less. You stretch, creaking like a haunted wardrobe, and prepare to face another glorious day of soot, soup, and shoes with holes in them. But for a moment, just a moment, you feel victorious. Because here, surviving the night is never guaranteed. And yet, somehow, you did. Morning, if you can call it that, seeps in through the cracks in your window like pale soup. There's no sunrise, just a soft gray that slowly brightens into a slightly less miserable gray. The sounds of London stir beneath your floorboards. Coughing, footsteps, the tin rattle of someone heating tea over a sputtering flame. You groan softly and sit up, each joint protesting like a unionized worker. It's time to start your day. Again. Congratulations. First things first. Hygiene. Or what passes for it in Victorian London. You look at the chipped bowl of water on the wooden washstand. It's cold. You poke it. Still cold. You splash some on your face anyway and immediately regret it. It feels like being slapped by a small, angry ghost. There's a sliver of soap, probably shared by everyone on the floor, and you try to make the best of it. It smells faintly of carbolic acid and onions. You scrub what parts of your body you can reach without dislocating anything, and dry off with a cloth that has definitely seen better decades. Your hair is beyond help. Your breath could fell a pony. But you're upright, vaguely clean, and you didn't die in your sleep, so technically, you're thriving. Now comes the challenge of dressing. Victorian clothing isn't known for being forgiving. Corsets, cravats, and 37 buttons stand between you and the outside world. You, being of more modest means, keep it simpler. Shirt, wrinkled, trousers, patched, waistcoat, one working button, and coat, vintage damp. You glance in a cracked mirror. You look like someone who could fix a boiler with nothing but rage and string. Still, it's time to head out. You navigate the stairwell again, this time stepping over someone who's either asleep or extremely relaxed. You offer a polite morning, just in case. Outside, the streets are already humming. Horses clop past, carts squeak under heavy loads, and bootblacks call out their services with theatrical flair. The air is thick with coal smoke, the smell of burnt toast, and just a hint of raw sewage. You breathe it in like a local. You head toward your place of employment, or, at least, the place where someone sometimes pays you to lift heavy things and not ask questions. You're what they call casual labor, which is a Victorian euphemism for very expendable. Work isn't guaranteed. It's more of a weather pattern. You pass men in top hats and women in feathered bonnets, their boots gleaming with polish and privilege. They walk quickly, as if the lower classes might be contagious. A constable tips his helmet at a particularly rich-looking gentleman, and immediately scowls at you. You nod respectfully, and try not to look like you've considered stealing a pie in the last 24 hours. You reach the docks, one of the liveliest centers of Victorian employment. There's shouting, stacking, loading, and always someone threatening to throw something overboard. You join the other hopefuls standing near the foreman. He has a clipboard and the power to make or ruin your day with a shrug. You're picked. Barely. You'll be unloading crates of what might be tea or might be asbestos. You don't ask. You lift, you grunt, and you try not to drop anything. Someone cuts their hand on a nail. Someone else drops a barrel and gets yelled at. It's all very dramatic, in a grimy, dockside opera kind of way. As you work, you overhear bits of conversation. Cholera's back in Soho. Did you hear about the fire in Whitechapel? Someone found a rat in their pie again. London, as ever, remains charming. One man complains loudly about the hours. Another jokes that at least this beats being in the army. A third says he'd rather be in prison. 3 meals and no heavy lifting. Historians still argue whether Victorian prison was actually more comfortable than dock work. Some claim yes. Others point to the uniforms and lack of gin. Your lunch break consists of sitting on a crate and eating a cold potato. Someone offers you a swig from a flask. You decline, suspecting it's less whiskey and more homemade regret. You stretch your back, which cracks like an old staircase, and you think about how some people commute to office jobs in the 21st century and complain about ergonomic chairs. By mid-afternoon, your hands are blistered, your shirt is soaked, and you've been yelled at 4 separate times. Once for walking too slowly, once for looking too tired, once for not smiling, and once just because someone needed to yell and you were handy. Work ends with no ceremony. You're paid a few coins, just enough to make tomorrow possible, but not enough to escape it. You tuck the money deep into your coat and start the long walk back. The streets are busier now. Children chase each other past market stalls. A preacher shouts from atop a box about the end times. You briefly consider shouting back. Too late. Instead, you buy a boiled sweet from a vendor and let it melt slowly in your mouth. It's the closest thing you've had to dessert all week. As you walk, you pass a group of chimney sweeps, small boys covered in soot, laughing too loudly for people who spend their days inside flues. One of them waves at you. You wave back. He's probably 8 years old and already has more grit than you. Your path home takes you past the public baths. There's a line out front. The sign says, "Hot water today." A miracle. You make a mental note to return later, if your coins stretch that far. Back at the lodging house, the common room is loud with conversation and the clink of tin mugs. A man is telling a story about how he once met Charles Dickens in a pub. Another insists he saw Queen Victoria ride past and swears she winked at him. You smile and listen from the corner. You made it through another full day of Victorian labor without falling into the Thames, getting arrested, or catching fire. That's what we call a win. You climb the stairs again, boots dragging, and collapse on your bed without ceremony. You still smell faintly of fish, coal, and despair, but it's a smell that says, "I worked today." And in this city, that's enough. You wake the next morning not because you're ready, but because the street outside decides it's time. A vendor's voice pierces your dreams like a fishhook. Hot eels. Eels and pies. Nothing wakes the soul quite like the concept of hot eels for breakfast. You groan, rub the crust from your eyes, and remind yourself you're still in Victorian London. Still surviving. Somehow, you sit up slowly. Everything creaks. Your back feels like a twisted carriage spring. You glance at your boots and wonder if it's socially acceptable to go barefoot for the rest of your life. It's not. You put them on anyway. Today, you decide you're going to treat yourself. Not to anything outrageous like comfort or dignity, but maybe to something small. A real breakfast. Maybe even tea that doesn't taste like disappointment and boiled socks. So you wander out into the fog-laced morning, the streets already alive with clamor. Coal carts trundle past. Dogs bark. A child runs by holding a cabbage like it owes him money. You pass the workhouse gate and make a point not to look too long. People stand in line for entrance. Tired, thin, and clutching bundles of their entire lives. You duck into a small cafe, a generous label. It's more of a shack with ambitions. Inside, the air smells of grease, cheap tobacco, and something sweet. The tables are sticky, and the waitress has the aura of someone who's seen every kind of man and remains unimpressed by all of them. You order tea and a slice of toast. It arrives slightly burnt, but there's butter. Real butter. Or something that dreams of butter. As you eat, you listen. Londoners talk constantly about politics, horse races, weather, and who died recently. One man insists there's a ghost in the baker's shop 2 streets over. Another says he found a frog in his boot and took it as a sign to quit his job. You file both stories away for later amusement. Across the cafe, a pair of gentlemen are deep in discussion. One mentions Charles Darwin and his mad theory about monkeys. The other scoffs and says, "If we came from apes, then my uncle's a tree." Historians still argue how widespread acceptance of Darwin's theories really was during the Victorian era. While scholars debated in journals, people in pubs mostly found the whole idea deeply unsettling, hilarious, or both. Finishing your meal, you step back outside and decide to walk a new path. You head west, toward neighborhoods where the streets are cleaner, the children less sticky, and the buildings start using words like terraced and elegant. This is the part of London where the rich reside, and while they still smell the same city air, they pretend not to notice. You reach Hyde Park, a rare oasis in this soot-streaked jungle. Inside, there's grass. Real, honest grass. Birds chirp. Couples stroll with parasols and slow, floaty gaits. You find a bench that isn't entirely soaked and sit. For a moment, you feel like someone who has leisure. You even close your eyes. A group of fashionable women passes by, giggling beneath lace-trimmed bonnets. One drops a handkerchief. You pick it up and hand it back. She thanks you with a smile that's more social duty than sincerity. Still, you nod. It's the closest you've come to romance in weeks, and it didn't involve an angry goose. A man nearby is reading a newspaper aloud to himself. The Times, naturally. He grumbles about the latest tax levies, about Prime Minister Disraeli and his exotic views, and then, without warning, launches into a tirade about the dangers of women riding bicycles. Something about the collapse of morals and the weakening of the uterus. You quietly scoot a little farther away. You stroll back through Kensington, where every townhouse has at least 3 chimneys and probably someone polishing them from the inside right now. You pass a toy shop with mechanical animals in the window. A monkey claps its cymbals in a way that feels oddly threatening. Eventually, your feet guide you toward the British Museum. Admission is free, one of Victorian London's rare blessings. Inside, the air changes. It's quieter, cooler, with a hush that feels borrowed from ancient tombs. You wander past artifacts and mummies, marble statues and Babylonian tiles. The Rosetta Stone stands stoically, surrounded by tourists in frock coats and teachers gesturing with pointed fingers. You stare at it for a long moment, marveling that something so old and cracked could be the key to understanding a forgotten world. Then a child runs past and sneezes directly on it. History lives on. You pass into the Egyptian wing. Rows of sarcophagi lie under glass, their painted faces calm and faintly bored. A tour guide whispers something about the afterlife. You wonder if ancient Egyptians ever dreamed of a place like London, so vast, so dirty, so alive. The odd thing about the Victorian era is how obsessed it is with death while being absolutely terrible at keeping people alive. Mourning culture is everywhere, locks of hair in pendants, black dresses for months, even special post-mortem portraits. The Victorians treated grief like a part-time job. Some historians believe this obsession stemmed from the high mortality rates, especially among children. Others argue it was just an excuse to wear dramatic hats. You exit the museum, slightly dustier than when you entered, and blink in the gray afternoon light. You check your pockets. Still have your money. Still breathing. Excellent. You walk toward Fleet Street, once the beating heart of newspapers and print shops. The scent of ink lingers faintly even now. You pass a bookseller's cart and pause. There's a copy of Great Expectations with a broken spine. You thumb through it, admire the illustrations, and return it gently. It costs more than your weekly bread. A passing priest nods at you. A boy sells matches with a mechanical cough. Somewhere behind you, someone starts a fight over a hat. You've been walking all day, seeing the city from top to bottom, or at least from middling to manageable. Your legs ache. Your stomach grumbles again. You spot a bakery and duck in, buying a meat pie that may or may not contain actual meat. You decide not to investigate. As the light dims, the street lamps begin to glow. A lamplighter passes by, long pole in hand, igniting each lamp with a graceful jab and twist. It's one of the rare romantic touches in this gritted landscape, a dance of fire and shadow. You follow their path, letting the light lead you homeward. You feel the city winding down, not sleeping, never sleeping, but settling like an old dog on a worn cushion. Still watchful. Still dreaming. And so are you. Evening settles over the city like a moth-eaten quilt, frayed, slightly itchy, but better than the chill underneath. You've returned to your lodging house, and the common room is buzzing. There's always that one guy loudly playing spoons in the corner. Someone's whittling a piece of wood into something vaguely spoon-shaped, probably out of envy. You collapse onto a creaky chair with your pie, still warmish and still a mystery. Dinner conversation is spirited. Someone claims to have seen Jack the Ripper last night, again. Someone else insists he is Jack the Ripper, though everyone ignores him because he also claims to be the King of France. The room smells like pipe smoke, spilled beer, and collective exhaustion. You exhale into it and let yourself relax. Someone pulls out a deck of cards. You join in, lose immediately, and then pretend you never cared in the first place. A few pence gone, but your dignity remains. Barely. You exchange stories, half-truths, and jokes that haven't aged well even by 19th century standards. Eventually, you drift upstairs and collapse onto your bed. Just as your eyes flutter closed, a horrible realization hits. You still need to take care of nature's call. Here lies the dark underbelly of Victorian life, sanitation, or more specifically, the lack of it. Indoor plumbing exists, yes, but not for you. You trudge back down, out into the courtyard, where the privy waits like a grim joke. It smells exactly as you feared. You do what must be done, eyes watering, and vow never to eat pickled eggs again. Back in bed again. Properly, this time. The room creaks with the snores and coughs of neighbors. You drift off, hoping for dreams that don't involve rats. But rats are part of your reality too. You see them the next morning, darting along alleyways, balancing on bins like tiny acrobats. One makes eye contact with you. You nod. Mutual respect. You're headed to a different part of town today. The East End. It's rough, it's crowded, and it's where many of London's newest residents have landed. Immigrants from Ireland, Eastern Europe, and the far reaches of the British Empire now call this place home. You pass through Spitalfields, where market stalls line the streets and voices bounce off brick walls in a dozen different accents. This part of London pulses. There's no pretense here, just people trying to live, to eat, to keep their children dry. You pass a soup kitchen, the line already long. The smell of cabbage is strong enough to knock out small birds. You pass a synagogue, its doorway busy with families in Sabbath best. Children race by with sticks and hoops, and a woman hangs laundry across the narrow street from her upstairs window. And here comes a real Victorian gem, the street performer. You pause to watch as a man swallows swords with unsettling enthusiasm while his companion plays a violin like it's being punished. A hat sits on the cobblestones for coins. You toss in one of yours. He winks mid-swallow. Not far away is a penny gaff, a kind of proto-theater where you can watch a melodrama, a puppet show, or something called The Tragedy of Tim the Tragic Turnip for a single copper coin. You go in, curious. The room is cramped, the stage is tiny, and the crowd is rowdy. The performance, questionable, but entertaining. A man in a fake beard delivers his lines with the passion of 1,000 unpaid actors. Victorians loved a bit of low entertainment, especially when it involved overacting, cross-dressing, or something mildly shocking. Historians still argue whether these penny theaters were corrupting public morals or simply giving people a way to laugh after 12 hours of coal dust and despair. You lean toward the latter. Back outside, the day is dimming again. You head toward Whitechapel Road, past factories that hum with machinery and spew out the kind of smoke that tastes like regret. Workers spill from the gates, faces grimy, expressions blank. You spot a woman clutching a bundle wrapped in newspaper. Inside, probably her day's earnings, offcuts, rags, maybe bones for resale. You walk alongside them for a while, weaving through carts and puddles. The buildings here lean together like old conspirators. You pass a gin shop, its doorway crowded. Gin, mother's ruin, they call it. Cheap, effective, and usually adulterated with turpentine. You hesitate, then move on. You've seen what it does to a man's liver and soul. Still, even in these streets, there's music. A boy plays a tin whistle near the corner. Two girls dance with the kind of energy that only comes from never having been tired enough yet. You pause to watch, letting the moment soak in. The city may be hard, but it has its charms. They're just buried deep beneath coal dust and desperation. You round a corner and nearly trip over a cart piled high with cabbage. The seller, an elderly woman with arms like ship ropes, scolds you for nearly bruising her stock. You apologize. She grunts. You're forgiven. Dinner tonight is from a pie shop that claims to serve authentic Victorian flavor. Which, from the smell, is probably true. You eat while walking, a meat and potato pie that tastes more of onion and mystery than anything specific. You don't mind. It's hot, and your hands are warm, and that's enough. As night falls, you decide to head toward the docks again. Not for work this time, but just to look. The water shimmers darkly, reflecting gaslights and a sliver of moon. Ships creak. Voices echo across the Thames in muffled syllables. You lean on the railing and watch a barge drift by like a slow-moving thought. There's something calming about the river at night. It carries everything: sewage, secrets, and stray dreams. London would collapse without it, though no one ever says thank you. You make your way back home slowly, feet sore but spirits oddly lifted. The night has cooled, and a mist hangs low, blurring the city's edges like an old photograph. You pass a man selling roasted chestnuts and decide to buy a few. They're burnt on the outside and hot enough to sear your tongue, but you enjoy them anyway. Back at your lodging house, you nod to the others milling about the common room. Someone's singing badly. Someone else is asleep on a bench, one shoe off, dreaming perhaps of warmer places. You climb the stairs, counting them like sheep. Your room greets you with the familiar scent of old wood and older clothes. You peel off your boots, stretch your aching back, and collapse onto the mattress. There's a hole in the ceiling where the plaster gave up long ago. You stare at it. Maybe tomorrow, you'll patch it with a bit of old newspaper. Maybe not. London roars outside your window. But in here, at least, it's quiet. You close your eyes and rest. Sleep doesn't come gently in Victorian London. It sneaks in between street noises, the clatter of hooves, and someone loudly arguing with a chimney. But eventually, your body surrenders. You drift into uneasy dreams of soot and sausage rolls. The morning arrives before you're ready, again. You rise slowly, stiff and cranky, your hair pointing in 9 directions. You throw on your layers, shirt, vest, coat, something resembling a scarf, and head downstairs. The boarding house cook has laid out a breakfast that consists mostly of toast and things pretending to be jam. You chew dutifully, then head out to tackle another day in the Empire's loudest city. Today, you're off to see the doctor. Not because you're deathly ill, though the mild cough you've been ignoring does sound suspiciously Dickensian, but because health in Victorian London is a whole world of curiosity. You weave through the morning fog, following the scent of horse manure and bakery steam, and make your way to a charity clinic. Inside, it's a mad cross between a sanctuary and a nightmare. A row of coughing patients lines the wall. A nurse in a crisp white apron moves between them with surprising efficiency. her expression somewhere between concern and "not again." You take a seat and prepare for the wait. Victorian medicine is a fascinating and terrifying beast. Germ theory is just gaining traction, thanks to Louis Pasteur and Joseph Lister, but it's still fighting an uphill battle against old-school bad air theories and the occasional enthusiastic bloodletting. You glance nervously at the table of instruments. There are more saws than you'd like in a healing establishment. The doctor finally calls you in. He's young, smells like carbolic acid and overconfidence, and listens to your lungs with a stethoscope that looks homemade. He declares you mostly alive, prescribes rest, and suggests avoiding damp environments. You don't have the heart to tell him you live in a damp environment. Still, you thank him. He offers you a tonic, which you accept. It tastes like gin mixed with licorice and regret. But hey, it's free. You exit into the street, lungs tingling slightly, and decide to reward yourself for surviving Victorian healthcare. What better way than to visit one of the city's newest attractions, the Crystal Palace? Well, not the original Crystal Palace, that glittering temple of glass and iron that once stood in Hyde Park during the Great Exhibition of 1851, but its relocated form in Sydenham, where it now towers over the park like a misplaced cathedral. You take the train. Yes, London has trains, and they're both marvels and mildly terrifying. Steam engines scream like angry kettles, and soot flies into your eyes with the accuracy of a trained assassin. You jostle between top hats, parasols, and a man carrying a goat. You don't ask questions. It's better that way. The Crystal Palace is breathtaking. A vast structure of glass and iron, it houses exhibits from all over the world. Statues, plants, machinery, full-size dinosaur models. Yes, dinosaurs, though they look more like overgrown lizards with identity issues. Historians still argue whether the sculptures accurately reflected scientific understanding, or were just Victorian fever dreams with a side of plaster. You wander through the exhibitions, marveling at the wonders of industry and empire. Steam engines hiss, textiles gleam, and every display seems to shout, "Look what Britain can do." It's both impressive and unsettling, like being shown someone's overly organized attic where every object has a story, and half of them were acquired questionably. One exhibit boasts a machine that can knit a sock in under an hour. Another showcases a printing press that can churn out pamphlets like a Victorian Twitter feed. You touch a lever, get yelled at, and apologize profusely. No touching. Noted. You stop by the botanical gardens, where exotic plants sweat gently under glass. The air is thick with humidity and the vague sense of colonialism. A sign explains that some of these species were brought back by British explorers who braved the savage wilds of various continents. You raise an eyebrow and move on. Lunchtime approaches, and you grab a meat pasty from a nearby vendor. It's warm and flaky, though you suspect it's 60% turnip. Still, your stomach is thrilled. You find a bench overlooking a mechanical fountain that spouts water in timed bursts. Children squeal with delight. One falls in. His nanny sighs, fishes him out, and resumes her knitting. You head toward the lower levels of the palace, where experimental gadgets and oddities reside. A man demonstrates an electric telegraph that sends messages over a wire. Fascinating stuff. Another booth promises that one day, you'll be able to talk across continents using wires and signals. You nod politely and suppress a chuckle. Sure, buddy. Yet these glimpses of the future are everywhere. You realize that Victorian London, for all its soot and cholera, is on the edge of massive change. It's chaotic, yes, but it's also a cauldron of invention. And maybe, just maybe, the madness has a purpose. You take one last look at the palace before boarding the return train. The glass sparkles in the afternoon sun like a giant chandelier hung by some eccentric deity. You find a seat between a woman with a basket of eggs and a man reading a newspaper aloud to no one. You relax into the rhythm of the train, soot be damned. Back in the heart of London, the city is gearing up for its usual evening chaos. Gas lamps flicker to life. Horses trot wearily. Street performers tune fiddles, and chimney sweeps head home covered in the kind of black that never really washes out. You pass by a chemist's shop, its windows glowing like honey. Inside, little bottles promise relief from every ailment: headaches, hysteria, poor digestion, unsatisfactory children. You buy a tiny tin of toothache powder, just for the novelty. It smells like menthol and lies. As night falls, you wander toward the river. There's a narrow bridge where lovers meet and thieves loiter. You lean on the railing, watch your breath curl in the cold, and listen to London breathe. The city doesn't sleep. Not really. It shifts, murmurs, stretches its limbs and eyes its next opportunity. Somewhere behind you, a musician plays a haunting tune on a violin. The notes rise above the water like smoke. You close your eyes and let the music carry you, away from soot and aching feet, away from the endless hustle. For a moment, you float. When you open them again, the city is still there, loud, unwashed, complicated, but also yours. You're surviving it, one odd, sooty, unforgettable day at a time. And tomorrow, well, you'll do it all again. The morning air is sharp and smells faintly of burnt coal, but you hardly notice anymore. You're walking through a maze of narrow streets in a part of London where the sun barely reaches and the fog likes to linger until noon. Welcome back to Whitechapel, the notorious heart of the East End, where life runs fast and hard, and the law often feels like a distant rumor. You've probably heard the stories, whispered in pubs and dark alleys, of a shadow stalking the streets, a mystery that's kept Londoners awake in fevered dread. Jack the Ripper. The name still sends a chill through your bones, though you try not to think about it too much. Historians still argue whether he was a single man or a collective of criminals, or even if he truly existed beyond the legends. What is certain is that his reign shook London's very foundations, spotlighting the city's dark underbelly in gruesome detail. You pass a butcher's shop where a man is expertly slicing meat, his knife flashing like lightning. The smell is sharp and metallic, reminding you of the grim tales told in hushed tones. But life here isn't all fear, it's also resilience. The women, many of whom bore the brunt of poverty and prejudice, navigate these streets with a tough grace. They are survivors, not victims. You wander through the markets, stalls bursting with cheap fabrics, fresh produce, and curiosities from all over the empire. A street hawker shouts about his miracle cures and tonics, while a boy darts by balancing a tray of eggs, precariously teetering as if the slightest gust would topple his fragile cargo. You smile. Some things never change. There's a small chapel tucked between two grimy buildings, its door open just enough to let in a sliver of light. Inside, the air is thick with incense and whispered prayers. It's a rare refuge from the noise and grime outside, where hope flickers in flickering candles and soft hymns. You step back outside and the cacophony resumes. Horses clip-clop by, carts rumble over cobblestones, and voices shout over one another. You duck into a pub, the warmth and murmur immediately soothing. The walls are lined with wood darkened by years of smoke and spilled ale. A group of dockworkers are playing cards, their laughter booming. They beckon you to join, and you do, even though you're terrible at poker. They tell stories of the docks, of ships that have sailed halfway around the world and back, of goods that have come from exotic places with names you can barely pronounce. You listen, fascinated. The Thames is the city's lifeblood, carrying wealth and misery alike. Sometimes, it feels like the river holds every secret London has ever tried to bury. A man next to you pulls out a battered pocket watch, winding it carefully. "Time's a funny thing here," he says. "Sometimes it drags, sometimes it flies. But always, it runs out." You nod, a little too solemnly. Outside, the gas lamps flicker on as dusk settles. The fog thickens, curling around lampposts like ghostly fingers. You leave the warmth of the pub reluctantly, stepping back into the chill. The streets take on a different character at night, a blend of beauty and menace. Shadows lengthen, and every alleyway seems to hold a secret. You stop by a small bakery that's still open, the smell of fresh bread a tiny comfort. The baker offers you a sample, a crusty roll with just the right amount of chewiness. You savor it, feeling the warmth spread inside you. Walking back, you hear the distant toll of Big Ben, each chime echoing through the fog. It's a reminder of the city's relentless pulse, the endless march of hours and days. You think about the people who live here, some lost, some found, all caught in the great machine of Victorian London. And you, standing here in the mist, are part of it too. You wake to the muffled clatter of street cleaners dragging brushes across the pavement, the rhythmic scrape oddly soothing against the backdrop of early morning fog. The city's noises filter through your thin window, distant yet persistent, a gentle reminder that London never truly rests, even when you do. Today, you set out to explore the intricate world of Victorian education, a system both celebrated and criticized. Walking toward a local schoolhouse, you pass children in ragged clothes, faces streaked with grime but eyes bright with curiosity. Many of them have never known a life beyond these cramped streets, yet here they are, sitting for lessons that promise a glimpse of something more. The schoolhouse is a modest brick building, its windows steamed up and flickering with candlelight. Inside, a stern teacher oversees a room full of eager, sometimes restless, children reciting their lessons aloud. You watch quietly, sensing the tension between hope and hardship. Education in this era is a hotly debated topic. Historians still argue whether the strict discipline and rote memorization truly benefited these children or simply prepared them to endure a lifetime of labor. You catch snippets of arithmetic and the occasional mispronounced Shakespearean line. The teacher's voice rises and falls, weaving order out of chaos. Nearby, a boy furiously scribbles in a tattered exercise book, his focus unwavering despite the distractions. Outside the classroom, a group of older students gather to discuss their futures. Some dream of apprenticeships in the city's factories or workshops, others of escaping altogether. You overhear a girl talking about becoming a governess, an unusual but respectable path for a woman, albeit one with its own hardships. You continue on, passing a Sunday school where lessons are mingled with hymns and moral instruction. The church bells ring faintly in the distance, their sound carrying both comfort and obligation. Education isn't just about reading and writing, it's about shaping character, instilling values, and sometimes enforcing conformity. You think about your own schooling, perhaps a little less rigorous but certainly less fraught with the pressure to survive. On the street outside, you encounter a bookstall piled high with cheap novels and pamphlets. Victorian Londoners were voracious readers, devouring penny dreadfuls and serialized stories that brought excitement and escapism. You pick up a worn volume, its cover illustrated with melodramatic scenes of heroism and horror. As you flip through the pages, you can't help but smile at the over-the-top drama, just the kind of distraction this city needs. Yet behind the fiction lies a deeper truth. People crave stories that make sense of their world, no matter how grim it may be. A gust of wind stirs the papers, and you tuck the book under your arm as you continue wandering. The streets begin to fill with market sellers setting up for the day, their calls blending into a vibrant chorus. You pass a poster advertising a public lecture on sanitation reform, a hot-button issue. The city's health problems are legendary, and efforts to clean up the streets and improve water supplies are met with resistance and skepticism. Some politicians view these reforms as costly and unnecessary, while reformers see them as vital to saving lives. You ponder the complexity of change in a city as vast and layered as London. Progress is slow, messy, and often resisted by those comfortable in the status quo. The sun climbs higher, burning through the fog in patches. You find a quiet spot in a small park, where a few weary souls sit on benches, reading newspapers or simply watching the world go by. A mother rocks her baby, humming softly. You close your eyes for a moment and breathe deeply, feeling the pulse of the city all around you. The grit, the hope, the endless stories weaving together like the cobblestones beneath your feet. As dusk approaches once again, you find yourself drawn to the bustling docks along the Thames, where the smell of salt water mingles with tar and fish. The docks are the city's veins, pulsing with the relentless movement of goods, people, and stories from all corners of the globe. Here, the empire's reach is tangible. Crates stamped with foreign markings, sailors swapping tales in a babble of accents, and the ever-present cry of seagulls circling overhead. You navigate through crowds of dockworkers unloading cargo, their muscles straining under the weight of heavy barrels and sacks. The air is thick with the scent of brine and sweat, and you notice the constant rhythm of boots on wooden planks, a cadence almost hypnotic. Despite the hard labor, there's an undeniable camaraderie among these men, a shared toughness born of long hours and uncertain pay. Nearby, children dart between crates, playing games that mirror the chaos of their surroundings. You spot a group gathered around a street performer, mesmerized by his juggling act involving knives and fiery torches. The performer grins broadly, his soot-streaked face lit by the flames, and you can't help but smile at the spectacle. Dockside life is both gritty and vibrant, a microcosm of London itself. You overhear conversations about distant ports, exotic spices, and the next big shipment, each snippet hinting at a world far beyond the city's foggy limits. Among the chatter, you catch a snippet about Limehouse, a nearby district known for its Chinese immigrant community and intricate networks of trade, and, rumor has it, the occasional illicit dealings. The area is shrouded in mystery and myth, often sensationalized in the press. Historians still argue whether the tales of opium dens and secret societies are exaggeration or reflection of real social tensions. Walking along the wharves, you come across a warehouse where barrels of salted herring are stacked high. The pungent aroma is overwhelming, and a worker jokingly warns you not to linger too long unless you want to smell like the sea for days. You pause to watch a group of sailors preparing to set off on a journey. Their faces are a mix of excitement and weariness, aware that life at sea is as unpredictable as the tides. A young sailor confides in a friend about his dreams of seeing Australia, while an older man mutters about the dangers lurking beyond the horizon. The docks are also a stage for darker stories. Smuggling, theft, and exploitation thrive in the shadows cast by towering ships. You hear whispers of crimps, who lure desperate men into service through deception and coercion. The law tries to keep up, but the docks remain a wild frontier within the city. As twilight deepens, gas lamps flicker on, casting long shadows over the water. The river reflects the shimmering lights, creating a scene both beautiful and eerie. You lean on the railing, watching barges glide silently by, their crews singing sea shanties that rise and fall like the waves. The rhythm of the river is ancient and unchanging, a reminder of London's enduring connection to the sea and the ever-changing world beyond. You take a deep breath, letting the salty air fill your lungs, and feel a quiet sense of belonging amid the chaos. The docks, with their mix of grit and grandeur, are a living heartbeat of the city, raw, real, and endlessly fascinating. You turn away reluctantly, the sounds of the river and city mingling in your ears as you make your way back through the labyrinth of streets, ready to face whatever the night holds next. The city at night is a different beast entirely, its daytime grime softened by shadows and the flickering glow of gas lamps. You stroll down a quieter street now, the clatter of hooves replaced by the occasional creak of wooden signs swinging gently in the breeze. Here, in the pockets of calm, you get a rare glimpse of Victorian London's social rituals, where the day's hard labor dissolves into evening entertainments and whispered conversations. You're drawn toward a theater, its marquee boasting a new melodrama. Inside, the scent of oil lamps, sweat, and cheap perfume mingles with the low murmur of an expectant crowd. The wooden benches creak under the weight of Londoners eager to escape their daily struggles for a few hours of thrills and laughter. The curtain rises, and a world of star-crossed lovers, dastardly villains, and heroic rescues unfolds in vivid detail. The actors' exaggerated expressions and booming voices seem almost larger than life, yet you find yourself captivated. Theater, you realize, is the city's pulse, its stories reflecting hopes, fears, and sometimes the messy truth. After the show, you wander toward a nearby music hall where a lively crowd gathers for a variety performance. Jugglers, comedians, and musicians take turns entertaining an audience that ranges from working-class families to curious upper-middle-class folk seeking novelty. You grin at a particularly cheeky performer who juggles flaming torches while cracking jokes about local politicians. It's all wonderfully absurd and completely necessary. Outside, street vendors sell roasted chestnuts and toffee apples, their carts glowing warmly in the evening gloom. You buy a chestnut and savor the nutty sweetness as you continue walking, the crunch under your teeth oddly satisfying. Turning a corner, you find yourself in a more shadowy part of town, where gas lamps struggle to pierce the darkness. The fog here is thicker, curling like smoke through narrow alleys and over cobblestones slick with rain. You hear the distant strains of a violin, a haunting melody that seems to float above the damp streets. The source is a lone musician, his hat outstretched for coins. You drop a penny in, and he nods gratefully, eyes reflecting a hard life tempered by art. This is a world away from the polished theaters and bustling markets. It's the city's other face, the gritty, often dangerous side where poverty and desperation loom large. You pass shadowy figures hurrying home, their faces tense with worry or indifference. Some neighborhoods are battlegrounds for rival gangs, while others are home to families scraping by day to day. The police patrol these streets in pairs, their uniforms stiff and their expressions grim. Crime is a constant challenge in Victorian London, and the force is often stretched thin. You overhear talk of the newly formed detective branch, an early version of Scotland Yard's investigative team, working tirelessly to bring order to chaos. Historians still debate how effective these early detectives truly were versus the mythic status they gained later. You pause near a pub where a group of regulars swap stories over pints of ale. They tell tales of pickpockets, haunted houses, and unexplained disappearances. You listen, fascinated, wondering how much is true and how much has been embroidered over late nights. As you walk back toward the heart of the city, the fog begins to lift slightly, revealing the glitter of gaslights and the silhouette of Big Ben standing tall against the night sky. The city feels alive with stories, each corner turned revealing another fragment of London's complex soul. You feel a quiet thrill knowing that no matter how many times you explore these streets, they will always hold new secrets and surprises, waiting for the next curious soul to uncover them. The clock ticks closer to midnight, and the city's pace shifts once again. The louder streets begin to quiet, but beneath the surface, a new rhythm pulses, one of secret meetings, whispered deals, and nocturnal rituals. You wander into a district known for its labyrinthine alleys and shadowy corners, a place where the line between survival and danger blurs. You spot a small, dimly lit shop with a flickering sign advertising herbal remedies and mysterious tinctures. Inside, an elderly woman, known locally as a cunning woman, mixes potions with practiced hands. Her knowledge of herbs and old remedies makes her a valued, if sometimes feared, figure. People come to her for cures that doctors won't offer, or for charms to protect against ill fortune. It's a curious blend of science, superstition, and tradition. Historians still argue whether such folk practices were widespread or simply romanticized by later storytellers. You watch as she prepares a draught with a careful touch, explaining to a visitor how nettle tea can ease aches and how a dash of foxglove might do more harm than good if used incorrectly. You wonder how many Londoners rely on these humble cures, especially in a city where modern medicine is still in its infancy and hospitals often seem more places of fear than healing. Stepping back into the night, you hear the faint strains of a street preacher shouting fire and brimstone, warning of damnation and urging repentance. His voice cuts through the silence, stirring a crowd of curious onlookers and some wary passers-by. Religion permeates every corner of Victorian life, offering comfort to some and control to others. You move on, passing a clandestine meeting of workers plotting for better conditions. The Industrial Revolution has brought incredible change, but at a steep cost: long hours, low wages, and dangerous workplaces. These early labor activists risk arrest to demand rights and dignity. Their whispers echo the growing unrest simmering beneath London's polished surface. Further along, a group of artists gather in a cramped studio, discussing new ideas about society and art. They are part of the burgeoning bohemian movement, challenging conventions and dreaming of a freer, more expressive world. Their passion feels like a spark in the city's darkness, a hopeful rebellion against rigidity. As you make your way back through twisting streets, the faint glow of dawn begins to chase away the shadows. You pause by the river, watching the first fishermen prepare their nets and boats for the day. The city, ever relentless, is stirring to life again. You reflect on the night's journey, its mix of mystery, hope, and hardship, and realize that London's true magic lies in its endless contradictions. It is a city of shadows and light, despair and joy, tradition and change. And you, walking its streets in the quiet hours, have glimpsed just a fraction of its soul. The city will sleep briefly before starting anew, and so will you. The first light of dawn spills over the rooftops, painting London in soft hues of pink and gold. The city exhales, shedding the weight of night's shadows and embracing the fragile promise of a new day. You stand on a quiet street corner, watching the world slowly come alive again. Shopkeepers pulling open shutters, lamplighters finishing their rounds, and the unmistakable clatter of early risers on cobblestones. The Victorian city you've wandered through these past hours is a place of contrasts and complexities. You've felt its grime and beauty, its fear and hope, its dark secrets and bright dreams. It's a place where survival requires grit, resilience, and sometimes a touch of luck. As you take a deep breath, you notice the soft warmth of the sun on your skin, a gentle reminder that even in the toughest times, light always finds a way in. You recall the people you've seen, the children in schoolrooms, the dockworkers by the river, the actors on the stage, the cunning women in their shops, all threads woven into London's rich tapestry. Historians still argue how much Victorian London truly changed by the century's end. Was it progress, or merely a shift in who bore the city's burdens? Were the reforms enough to lift people out of misery, or did they simply mask deeper inequalities? These questions linger, inviting you to ponder long after the streets fall silent once more. As you begin to walk home, the city's familiar sounds fade into a comforting background hum. The distant chime of church bells, the rustle of leaves in a quiet park, the faint murmur of life going on. You feel a calm settle over you, a peaceful acceptance of the city's endless rhythms. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let yourself drift. Let the stories of Victorian London, with all their shadows and flickers of light, carry you gently into sleep. Good night, and sweet dreams. As the city settles into a softer pace, you feel the tension of the day begin to melt away. Imagine the fog lifting slowly, revealing streets bathed in gentle morning light. The distant echoes of footsteps and laughter soften to a murmur, blending with the quiet rustling of leaves and the whisper of a gentle breeze. You breathe deeply, feeling the calm wrap around you like a warm blanket. The grime and noise of the bustling city fade, replaced by a serene stillness. The world slows, and with it, your thoughts begin to float, light and free. Remember, the city is vast and full of stories, but for now, you are safe, quiet, and at peace. Let your eyelids grow heavy, the sounds around you dimming like a lullaby sung by the streets themselves. The glow of the gas lamps fades into a soft twilight as you drift further, cradled by the rhythm of the past and the comfort of the present. Sleep well, knowing that the city's stories will be here, waiting for you whenever you return. For now, rest easy, wrapped in the gentle embrace of night.